Nigeria's Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, in her presentation to the Senate Committee on Local and Foreign Debts, had revealed that the country's total public debt will hit 38 trillion naira by December 2021. She noted that the total public debt stock, that is the external and local borrowings of the federal and state government and the Federal Capital Territory, stood at 31.01 trillion naira, which is approximately $85 billion as of June 30, 2021. And it's projected, based on existing approval at the time, to rise to 32.51 trillion naira by December 31st, 2020. Meanwhile, with planned borrowing of 6.17 trillion naira in 2021, the country's total public debt is expected to rise to 38.68 trillion naira by December 31st, 2021. While joining us to discuss this and other economic issues around Nigeria is a senior economist, Dr. Boniface Chizea. Good morning, Doctor, and thank you for joining us on the morning show today.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
As you are aware, analysts are increasingly worried about the government's ballooning deficits and unsustainable debt service costs. According to the President's 2021 budget presentation, right? The documents, the federal government plans to spend 13.08 trillion naira in 2021. Which will be financed by a revenue of 7.88 trillion naira. Now, what do you make of this?
Well, I think that it's a sign of the times. I think that what's happening in this country is that we don't have the capacity, to generate the revenue we need. That's putting it bluntly. We don't, and it's been so for quite some time. And so you have a country that is dependent to a large extent on the sale of petroleum. And so we've tried since 1986 to try and diversify the economic base of this country. And that's the point about the structural adjustment program. It was introduced in 1986. But somehow we put all these plans in place, and we don't seem to be making much progress in terms of implementation. But having said that, there are many countries around that want to borrow and not able to borrow. I think that what is worrisome is that the borrowing is mounting, and sometimes it's being borrowed for consumption, which is wrong. Because the thing about debt is that you mortgage future generations their interest. And so President Buhari, if he's not a statesman, is trying to borrow. You find that repayments, you have grace periods to repay, and so on and so forth. You start repaying after about 7 years, and so on. So you leave it for the next person that's going to come. So you create the headache for another person. But it's not just the person. We're talking about future generations of Nigeria. And so that's why when you have to borrow, essentially, the received wisdom is you should borrow and invest in things that will improve the environment, make the environment attractive for investment, that would be long-lasting, and so that's, yes, so you borrow and you invest properly. So I think also, some of the problems we have is that the due diligence we do when we borrow is also an issue. So we borrow monies, and then we spend those monies, and they're difficult to track. More so when this borrowing it does budget support. So that means, like she just told us, so you have your budget, and then you have 13-point-something trillion budget, and your revenue generation is about 7. And even the revenue generation estimated, you're not even sure there might be some shortfalls. Okay, so you have that. So ab initio, so you have that issue. But what is most challenging is that we have issues of fiscal sustainability. So that means you borrow even the monies we are getting, and you vis-a-vis what you're supposed to pay. If we show fidelity with our repayments of our debts and so on, we'll be spending probably 80-90% of our revenues service debt. So that's simply not practicable. It's not where to go. So I think those are the challenges.
Okay. One of the things that you mentioned earlier on was regards to the loans and the repercussions of having it on subsequent generations, and I wanted you to sort of elaborate more on what the repercussions are likely to be if we carry on piling on this debt, which, like you said, one of the things is the leading on to the generations. But I wanted you to sort of elaborate on some other points as well.
Those of us who've been around for some time. Queen Yuwala came here and did some tricks for us. So So we had debt relief. It was about what it is now. 30-something trillion naira and so on. So she got 18 trillion write-off, and we paid 12. And there's also of comments, were there. And so what that does to you? Why is it necessary to make sure that a country cannot go broke? You can't go broke. So because it's a nation state, you can't go broke. But what then happens is that you can't attract credits anymore. It becomes difficult for you. People are not prepared to lend to you. Now, even multilateral institutions that would normally come with soft loans and so on and so forth, some of them, in fact, were entitled to. They're going to be reluctant, to do so. And then even those who do so, now automatically the risk factor that's attached to your country increases. And so what that means is that even if you're importing stuff from overseas and so on, and you're shipping them to Nigeria, the insurance premium you pay, to that extent, would increase. And so what that does, in effect, is that most businessmen, they're there to in business, and they have to recoup the cost. And so as the costs are increasing, so it's being passed on to the consumer, and then prices are galloping. Now today, in fact, one of the problems we have today is rising prices. It's not been like that for quite some time. So we have to be very careful. So there's no item of purchase today that in recent past has not witnessed an increase. And obviously, why is that so? Because we are trying to reflate the economy. We are printing money. So we are injecting so much currency that is not backed up by productivity. But having said that, so the thing is that what are the options? There are no options. There are no options. So
you're saying there are no. The federal government has maintained that one of the ways to improve revenue is tax reforms, right? Now, in the wake of these economic situations, like you have just, mentioned,
yes.
I mean, is it really the way to go at this point?
A tax increase, yeah, but you see, tax increase is also a burden. So it could be a disincentive. So if you're a business person and it will also make your environment uncompetitive. So if, for instance, I'm coming from overseas and I want to come and looking for where to go and invest. Now, one of the things I have to take into account will be the tax burden. And in Nigeria, it's not just the tax burden. Now it's the multiplicity of taxes. So that's an issue. And so you have that. And now, aggressively, I just have recent experiences. Aggressively, the internally generated revenue is being looked for aggressively. So you just park your car anywhere, they just tow it. It happened to me a few weeks ago. Yesterday it happened again at the airport. My driver just stopped maybe I shouldn't stop, and tried to make a call, find out as I didn't certain thing. They clamped 10,005 was charged. So I think there are issues, and the tax revenue is here, and then also what we're getting again is it tax to GDP ratio. We're being told that we have about the lowest, but it's not to increase; it's to broaden the tax net. I say to people, there are lots of people who are doing business in Nigeria and they're not paying any taxes. And so you go to market women, go to market, go to Karen, go to all those places, and the turnover is massive. And they're not. So you go and impose a levy, flat levy. So if you're in this market, so I think that it's not to, if you increase it, it could act as a disincentive. You can, it'll be punitive, and for those who are tied, pay as you earn, and so on. And also, like as I said earlier on, it could make your environment, it could remove the competition, the emphasize the competition, which you should enjoy. But we have to pay taxes. And the government's not been able to generate enough. But I think that we have to put our taking caps on. There are many things we're not doing that we should be doing. We're just talking about gas, the gas decade and so on and so forth. Nigeria is a gas region. Oil is just, but we've concentrated on oil. Even that oil, in fact, we're not doing what we're expected to do. And so we're not talking about gas decade and so on and so forth. Gas is where the focus should be.
Okay, so I want to get a better understanding regarding our borrowings. Is it possible to put a cap or a ceiling at, public spending, or would that have a knock-on effect on the economy as a whole? And just before you say one or two things, you mentioned diversification, a lot, but you're not really giving us where we should be diversifying into. A lot of people advocate for agriculture, but where would you say we should be going into at the moment aside from oil?
Well, I think we have a Fiscal Responsibility Act, and then there's a cap on how much we're expected to borrow. It's there, and then also borrowings and so on we should take. It's all there, but the thing is that it's been observed in the breach. So even you go to the central bank and the amount of accommodations the bank is supposed to be given to fiscal authorities and terms of deficit funding and so on and so forth. It's all there. And the time that I should be repaid is also there. But then, you have pressure, and then that they have difficulties in trying to get this, comply with these things. And, Buhari appoints the governor of the central bank, and there's a limit to how much push he's able to, to give. Now, if you talk of diversification of our economy, we had to diversify. I just mentioned gas. But unfortunately, you don't have lower hanging fruits in this respect. So you have to it takes some time, for you to be able to do that. It's not something that you just go and say, we'll turn the tap and it's going to run. But so if you're talking of lower hanging fruits, we have talking about taxation, like we said earlier on. And so we make sure that we mobilize tax revenues. We make sure that leakages are blocked. Lots of monies are mobilized, and they don't come into the system. And then you take something like, for instance, NNPC. We have an arrangement that it's difficult to, for you to logically support, whereby NNPC earns its revenue, spends the money, and deducts what it has spent before it remits. And that's why you find that there are no remittances. Now, when you have sort of arrangement, you are concentrating so much power on the agency. So it decides what it spends, it says how it's going to spend it, and then so it pays subsidy, which we talked about, that it should be banished from our system. So it pays subsidy, humongous subsidy, the amount of money you hear. They pay 120 billion, some says a day, some say in 200 billion in a month, and so on. That money could have been used for the social sector. So you find that you have education, you have hospitals, you have roads, and so on. Those expenditures were not being able to, to meet up because there are lots of leakages in the system. So if you're talking about diversification, I'm talking about lower hanging fruits. That's why the governors have come and said that we should increase the pump price of petroleum from where it is today, 168 to, is it 200, almost 300. And then, of course, if we did that, the bottom will fall out of this economy. Of course, the president knows he isn't going to be able to do that. So there are lots of things we could do. We can tackle the subsidy we pay. We've increasing tariffs, and some of the tariffs we increase are not just justifiable. And so increase where I live, our tariff for electricity has increased by 100%. So our China minister before we take 20,000 naira, now have to do 40 for the same units. And of course, there are assurances. That will supply will be steady, and I'm say, okay, we'll go for it. If supply is going to be steady, and I don't have to go for diesel and so on. But is that happening? No.
All right. I wanted your reaction to Nigeria's debt to China, right? Yes, currently Nigeria has spent $195 million to pay its debt to China just in 2020 alone. And according to the Debt Management Office, about $87.23 billion is what our public debt is. Now, would you say that Nigeria is adopting the best practices for external borrowing, given the amounts, spent on servicing all of our debts?
Well, I think when you are stretched like this and you are looking for monies, and then you diminish your degrees of freedom. And so your ability to look around and so on and so forth. So you're looking for money, and sometimes what's more important is that you're getting it. And so you get it. And then and you're looking for, and you're borrowing to the extent that we are borrowing. And then your degrees of choice is limited, and so you get it from where you're going to get it, and so you're adding it on. And so if really, as a nation, if we should borrow from what? Lateral institutions. From IMF, World Bank, and so on and so forth. So they come with conditionalities that are quite friendly. Now, the Chinese, of course, but because we are looking for money now, the railways, I think they're all Chinese funded and so on and so forth. So we go for railways and so on. Now, it's good to have all these things in place, but I think that my concern is that we are not the due diligence we do. If we invest in railways, that's good, but then how do we plan to to make repayments, from the revenues that we generate from operating the railways. Those are some of the challenges. Now, if you could do that, so you have railways, you have the one that operates between Abuja and Kaduna. Today, you hear that this is happening. Sometimes you have even bandits and so on, and interfering and so on. So you have all sorts of challenges. So if you can borrow money and invest it in capital projects, first of all, what it does to you is that it minimizes the opportunities of rent seeking. So people taking that money, diverting it, and so this money is going to spend on this. If you are a National Assembly, and you're supposed to, you are charged with monitoring, and you really want to do it the way you should do it, then it's easier to monitor. And you can also attach revenues that you generate from such projects, for your repayment. You could also do that. So those are the best practices in terms of debt management. But like I said, if you challenge, so you are limited. So we are going to various sources. Going to the Chinese, to borrow, it's add-on. And they come with their terms. They tell you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you said going to the Chinese
to borrow. Yeah, it's an add-on. That is
add-on.
Add-on.
Okay.
So add-on, that opportunity you add to, so it has an add-on. So you borrow from them, and they have their own conditionalities. And then it's for you, so if you are those that are going to negotiate for us, if they're patriotic enough, to make sure that they get the best terms for Nigeria. But of course, you can't take that for granted. So those who go to negotiate, sometimes allow their own personal interest, to interfere with the negotiations.
Right.
Okay. We've only got a minute left, so let me just ask you this. It's regarding internal revenue generation. What are some of the challenges and lessons learned, and what should we be doing to boost IGRs generally in states?
Well, I think the states, better be up and doing, because that's the challenge going forward. They have to do something. I think, like I said, sometimes they're doing it aggressively, they're doing it the average citizen is a victim in the process. I just recanted my experience. But I believe that there's lots of opportunities here. But because we've operated this federation, every month they run cap in hand, to federal government, for monies, to be given to them. And sometimes they begin to insist the amount of money they're going to get should not fall below a certain percent. That shouldn't be so. Government, you have money, amount of money you have in the federation account is what you're going to share. And so it's for them they should put on their taking cap, go into investment. They should also go and borrow. They should be able to borrow on their own. Or maybe the federal government guarantees and invest in projects. I see across River State, guys going into farming and so on and so forth. Ayade, a few other people are doing the same thing. So, okay, that's the way to go. They should begin to think of projects that will generate revenue.
All right, then. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me.